Winter of 1978, on a dark, quiet street in the city of St. Petersburg, a man stood alone. His name was Viktor Petrov. He was 51 years old, a husband, a father, a senior engineer at one of the most secretive military research facilities in the Eastern Bloc. And tonight, he was about to do something that would either make him the most valuable spy the CIA had ever recruited, or get him executed by a firing squad. In his coat pocket, he carried a small piece of paper. On that paper was a message he had tried to deliver not once, not twice, but multiple times over the past year. And every single time, he had failed. You see, Viktor Petrov wanted to betray his country. He wanted to hand over military secrets to the West. Secrets about radar systems. Secrets about fighter jets. Secrets about weapons technology that could give the Americans an edge in the Cold War. But here's the thing, the CIA didn't trust him. Every time he approached American diplomats in St. Petersburg, they ignored him. They thought he was a trap, a KGB plant, a setup designed to embarrass the United States. So there he stood in the freezing cold, with secrets worth billions of dollars in his head, and no one willing to listen. But tonight was going to be different. Tonight, Viktor Petrov would finally make contact. And what happened next would trigger a decade-long espionage operation that would become one of the most successful and most tragic spy stories in Cold War history. This is the story of the billion-dollar spy. Before we dive into Viktor's story, you need to understand the world he lived in. It was the late 1970s. The Cold War was at its peak. On one side, you had the United States and its allies, the West. On the other side, you had the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, a collection of communist nations locked in an ideological battle with the West. And at the heart of this battle was espionage. Both sides were desperate to know what the other was doing. What weapons were they building? What technology were they developing? What were their military strategies? The CIA, America's Central Intelligence Agency, had spies all over the world. Their job was to gather intelligence, recruit assets, and stay one step ahead of the Soviets. The KGB, the Soviet Union's infamous security agency, was equally ruthless. They monitored everything. Every phone call, every letter, every conversation. If you were suspected of being disloyal to the state, you disappeared. It was that simple. Now imagine living in that world. Imagine being a Soviet citizen who disagreed with the government. Imagine wanting to fight back, but knowing that one wrong move could cost you everything. That was Viktor Petrov's reality. Viktor Petrov was born in 1927 in a small village outside St. Petersburg. His childhood was difficult. His father was a mid-level government official, a loyal party member who believed in the Soviet system. His mother was a quiet woman who kept her opinions to herself. But as Viktor grew older, he began to see cracks in the system. He watched as neighbors were arrested for speaking out against the government. He saw families torn apart by political purges. He heard whispers of labor camps in Siberia, places where people were sent and never returned. Still, Viktor kept his head down. He studied hard. He was smart, exceptionally smart. And eventually, he earned a position at one of the most prestigious military research institutes in the country. His specialty? Radar systems and aircraft avionics. In other words, Viktor Petrov had access to some of the most sensitive military technology in the Soviet Union. He worked on radar systems that could detect American bombers. He worked on avionics for fighter jets that were being developed to counter Western aircraft. He had blueprints, technical specifications, and classified documents that the CIA would have killed to get their hands on. But for years, Viktor did his job without question. He was a loyal employee, a model citizen. So what changed? What made a respected engineer decide to risk everything, his career, his family, his life, to become a spy? The answer lies in a tragedy that shook Viktor to his core. In 1965, Viktor's wife, Natasha, fell seriously ill. She needed specialized medical treatment that was only available to high-ranking party officials and their families. Viktor applied for access to the special hospitals. He begged. He pleaded. He called in every favor he had. But he was denied. You see, Viktor was a brilliant engineer, but he wasn't politically connected. He wasn't a party insider. He was just a worker. And in the Soviet system, that meant he was expendable. Natasha died 3 months later. Viktor was devastated. But more than that, he was angry. He had given his entire life to this country. He had worked tirelessly on projects that strengthened Soviet military power. And when he needed help, when his wife was dying, the system had turned its back on him. That was the moment everything changed. Viktor didn't make a dramatic decision overnight. He didn't wake up one morning and say, "I'm going to become a spy." It was a slow burn, years of resentment building up inside him. But by the mid-1970s, Viktor had made up his mind. He was going to hurt them. He was going to hurt the system that had taken everything from him. And the best way to do that? Give their secrets to the enemy. In January 1977, Viktor made his first attempt to contact the Americans. He spotted a car with diplomatic plates, a vehicle belonging to the U.S. Embassy. He followed it to a gas station and approached the driver, an American diplomat. Viktor handed him a note. The note said in broken English, "I have information, military secrets. I want to help." The diplomat looked at him, said nothing, and drove away. Viktor was confused. Had he done something wrong? Was his approach too direct? He tried again a few weeks later. Same result. And again. And again. Each time the Americans ignored him. What Viktor didn't know was that the CIA was terrified of exactly this kind of approach. You see, the KGB was notorious for setting traps. They would send fake volunteers, people who claimed to have valuable information, to approach American diplomats. Once the Americans took the bait, the KGB would expose them, creating an international scandal. The CIA had been burned before. They were suspicious of anyone who approached them too eagerly. So every time Viktor tried to make contact, the CIA assumed he was a KGB plant. For nearly 2 years, Viktor was ignored, rejected, dismissed. But he didn't give up. In early 1978, something changed. A new CIA officer arrived at the U.S. Embassy in St. Petersburg. His name was James. We'll call him James Harrison. James was young, ambitious, and, most importantly, willing to take risks. When he heard about the strange Soviet man who kept approaching American diplomats, he was intrigued. Unlike his colleagues, James didn't immediately dismiss Viktor as a KGB trap. What if he's real? James asked. What if this guy actually has something valuable? His superiors were skeptical, but they gave James permission to investigate, carefully. On a cold night in March 1978, James arranged to be at the same gas station where Viktor had approached diplomats before. And just as expected, Viktor showed up. This time, instead of driving away, James rolled down his window. "You've been looking for us," James said quietly. Viktor's heart nearly stopped. After 2 years of rejection, someone was finally listening. "Yes," Viktor whispered. "I have information. Important information. About radar. About aircraft. I can help you." James studied the man's face. He saw fear, desperation, but also determination. "Get in," James said. And just like that, Viktor Petrov became a CIA asset. Over the next few weeks, James met with Viktor multiple times. Always in secret, always at night, always in different locations. They would meet in parked cars, in empty parks, in the back rooms of obscure shops. Every meeting was a risk. If the KGB discovered what was happening, both men would be dead. During these meetings, Viktor explained who he was and what he had access to. And the more James listened, the more he realized the CIA had stumbled onto something extraordinary. Viktor wasn't just some low-level bureaucrat with rumors and gossip. He was a senior engineer with direct access to classified military projects. He had technical specifications for radar systems. He had blueprints for aircraft avionics. He had information that could give the United States a massive strategic advantage. James immediately reported back to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. The response was electric. "This could be the most valuable asset we've ever had in the Soviet Union," one senior official said. "We need to handle this perfectly." And so began one of the most carefully managed espionage operations in CIA history. Viktor was given a code name, Monarch. He was given training on how to photograph documents using a tiny camera disguised as a pen. He was taught how to detect surveillance. He was shown how to use dead drops, secret locations where he could leave information for the CIA to retrieve. Viktor learned quickly. He was methodical, precise, careful. And over the next decade, he would deliver more valuable intelligence than almost any other spy in Cold War history. From 1978 to 1985, Viktor Petrov lived a double life. By day, he was a respected engineer, a loyal Soviet citizen who showed up to work every day, attended party meetings, and kept his head down. By night, he was Monarch, a CIA asset who was systematically photographing every classified document he could get his hands on. The information he provided was staggering. He gave the CIA detailed specifications for Soviet radar systems, information that allowed American engineers to develop countermeasures and jamming technology. He provided blueprints for advanced fighter jet avionics, allowing the U.S. Air Force to understand Soviet capabilities and develop superior aircraft. He delivered intelligence on weapons systems, missile guidance technology, and military communications. One former CIA official later estimated that the information Viktor provided saved the United States billions of dollars in research and development costs. Instead of spending years trying to figure out what the Soviets were building, American engineers could simply study Viktor's documents. But the work was incredibly dangerous. Every time Viktor photographed a document, he risked being caught. Every time he met with his CIA handlers, he risked being followed. Every day he lived with the knowledge that one small mistake could mean death, and the pressure was taking a toll. Viktor began losing weight. He couldn't sleep. He was constantly looking over his shoulder, checking for surveillance, wondering if today would be the day the KGB finally caught him. His handlers noticed the strain and offered to extract him, to help him escape to the West. But Viktor refused. "I'm not done yet," he told them. "There's more I can do." So he kept going, year after year, document after document, until everything came crashing down. In 1985, the CIA suffered one of the most devastating betrayals in its history. A man named Edward Lee Howard, a former CIA officer, defected to the Soviet Union. Before his defection, Howard had access to information about CIA operations in the Eastern Bloc, including the identity of Monarch. When the KGB learned that Viktor Petrov had been spying for the Americans for nearly a decade, they were furious. But they didn't arrest him immediately. Instead, they watched him. They wanted to understand the full scope of his betrayal. They wanted to know exactly what he had given the Americans and how he had done it. For weeks, Viktor continued his routine, unaware that the KGB was monitoring his every move. Then, on June 13, 1985, they made their move. Viktor was leaving his apartment building when two cars suddenly pulled up. Men in dark coats jumped out and grabbed him before he could react. "Viktor Petrov," one of them said, "you are under arrest for treason against the Soviet Union." Viktor didn't resist. He knew this moment had been coming for years. In some ways, he was almost relieved. The game was finally over. Viktor was taken to Lefortovo prison, one of the most feared detention facilities in the Soviet Union. For months he was interrogated. The KGB wanted to know everything. Every document he had stolen. Every meeting he had with the CIA. Every technique he had used to avoid detection. Viktor knew that nothing he said could save him. The evidence against him was overwhelming. And he had no intention of betraying his CIA handlers or giving the KGB information that could endanger other assets. So he talked, but carefully. He admitted to what the KGB already knew. He confirmed details they had already discovered. But he never revealed anything new. He never gave them information that could be used against the Americans. Throughout the interrogation, Viktor remained calm, almost detached. When asked why he had betrayed his country, his answer was simple. "You took everything from me," he said. "My wife died because of this system. I watched good people suffer while corrupt officials lived in luxury. I did what I believed was right." The KGB interrogators didn't understand. To them, Viktor was a traitor, nothing more. But Viktor saw himself differently. He wasn't a traitor. He was a patriot, just not to the Soviet government. He was loyal to something bigger, to truth, to justice, to the hope that someday his country would be free. In late 1986, Viktor Petrov was brought before a military tribunal. The trial was closed to the public. There were no journalists, no outside observers, no international attention. Just Viktor, his accusers, and a panel of judges who had already decided his fate. The charges were read aloud: treason, espionage, passing classified information to a foreign power. Viktor did not deny the charges. He couldn't. The evidence was irrefutable. When asked if he had any final words, Viktor stood tall and addressed the court. "I did what I did because I believed in a better future for my country," he said. "I do not regret my actions. I only regret that I could not do more." The judges deliberated for less than an hour. The verdict: guilty on all counts. The sentence: death by firing squad. Viktor showed no emotion when the sentence was announced. He had made peace with this moment long ago. On September 24, 1986, Viktor Petrov was executed. He was 59 years old. There was no public announcement, no media coverage, no acknowledgement from the Soviet government that one of their own had been feeding secrets to the Americans for nearly a decade. Viktor simply disappeared. His family was informed of his death weeks later. They were told he had been convicted of crimes against the state and executed. No further details were given. For years, Viktor's story remained classified, buried in the secret files of both the CIA and the KGB. It wasn't until after the Cold War ended that the full scope of his contribution became known. So, what was Viktor Petrov's legacy? According to CIA estimates, the intelligence Viktor provided was worth approximately $2 billion. Let me say that again. $2 billion. The information he delivered allowed the United States to develop advanced electronic warfare systems. It helped American engineers design aircraft that could evade Soviet radar. It gave military planners critical insights into Soviet capabilities and weaknesses. Some historians believe that Viktor's intelligence contributed directly to the technological superiority the West maintained throughout the 1980s, a superiority that ultimately helped bring about the end of the Cold War. But beyond the strategic value, Viktor's story raises profound questions. What drives a man to betray everything he knows? What makes someone willing to risk death for a cause they believe in? For Viktor, the answer was deeply personal. The Soviet system had failed him. It had let his wife die. It had crushed good people under the weight of its corruption and cruelty. And so Viktor fought back, the only way he knew how. He didn't carry a gun. He didn't lead an army. He fought with information, with secrets, with the quiet courage of a man who believed that truth was more powerful than any weapon. But there's another side to this story, a side that's often overlooked. Viktor Petrov was not just a spy. He was a human being. He was a father who loved his children but could never tell them the truth about what he was doing. He was a colleague who showed up to work every day, knowing that the people around him would be devastated if they ever learned his secret. He was a man who lived in constant fear. Fear of being caught, fear of being tortured, fear of bringing shame upon his family. And in the end, he paid the ultimate price. We talk about spies as if they're characters in a movie, glamorous figures living exciting double lives. But the reality is far more complicated. Viktor spent his final years looking over his shoulder. He couldn't trust anyone. He couldn't confide in his closest friends. He carried the weight of his secret alone, knowing that one mistake would mean death. And when the end finally came, he faced it with dignity. He didn't beg for mercy. He didn't try to make excuses. He accepted his fate because he believed, truly believed, that what he had done was right. The story of Viktor Petrov is one of the most remarkable espionage stories in Cold War history. A single man, working alone, armed with nothing but a tiny camera and extraordinary courage. He fooled the KGB for nearly a decade. He delivered intelligence worth billions of dollars. And he did it all because he believed that the truth mattered more than his own life. But his story is also a tragedy. Viktor never saw the fall of the Soviet Union. He never witnessed the freedom he had fought for. He died alone in a prison cell, executed by the government he had spent years undermining. And yet, in some ways, Viktor won. The intelligence he provided helped the West maintain its technological edge. It contributed to the pressure that eventually brought the Soviet system to its knees. And it reminded the world that even in the darkest times, there are people willing to stand up for what they believe in. Viktor Petrov was called many things: a traitor, a spy, a criminal. But to the men and women at the CIA who worked with him, he was something else entirely. He was a hero. And that's the story of the billion-dollar spy. A man who risked everything and lost everything in the pursuit of something he believed was greater than himself. If you found this story compelling, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have many more incredible spy stories coming soon. Tales of courage, betrayal, and the shadowy world of Cold War espionage. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss a single one. And if you have thoughts about Viktor's story, do you think he was a hero or a traitor? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your perspective. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, in the world of espionage, nothing is ever quite what it seems.